Today's video is brought to you by my amazing patrons on Patreon. Priority deck requests and extended discussions are just some of the many perks you get for being a patron. Consider supporting the channel today. Welcome back to today's build. Whether you're just looking for upgrades or have no idea how to build this deck, I'll be your guide to this wonderful game we all love. Let's get started. Today's deck will make you bend the knee. His name is Extus, and this is Bloodletting. I have just so many questions for whoever designed this card. It would really bother me to not be able to use both sides of this, and for a long time I tried to make a version of the deck that can use both sides really effectively. That deck exists, and it works well, but never as well as the builds that focused on just one face. So to bring this up to speed, let's look at what each face asks of you. Awaken the Blood avatar asks you to set up a lot of creatures to be able to cast this for cheap. Since we don't want to be spending the resources to make those sacrifices as non-token creatures, that means we need tokens. But the more times we cast this, the less worthwhile that payoff becomes by comparison. Damage modifiers help, but never fully make up for how many resources you're sinking into this. Instead, what you really want is to copy the spell to make this efficient enough to really hurt. And since those tokens enter with haste, most infinite mana combos are enough to win the game off of. On his front side, Extus recovers creature cards whenever we magecraft, so we're splitting our focus between creatures, instants, and sorceries, which is usually a difficult mixture to balance. Luckily, Extus makes up for it by essentially negating the additional costs of a lot of different spells and making our resource plays more efficient. In particular, since we have to be playing non-token creatures to have a target to recover, I like the sacrifice effects over the discard effects because it lets us loop cheap enter the battlefield effects. Then there's this double strike ability that doesn't seem to be doing anything for the rest of the deck, but nonetheless turns on a lot of cool tricks that you'll see in the deck list. So which side should you build? The backside asks for a lot of resources during the early and mid game while making up for it with a win condition in the command zone during the end game. But Extus facilitates our mid game resources, which makes it a lot easier to actually get to an end game state, beating out the setup cost of the backside. So I think I like Extus better than a Blood avatar deck. To start with, EDH Rec lists cards for decks that focus on either side, so we'll need to use the advanced filters to see more relevant data. But because it's not a tokens deck and there's not as much demand for them, we'll be making these swaps. These cards are doing things that we're doing, but not in a very helpful way. Viscera Seer is an extra sack outlet for our creatures, but the more things we sack to her, the fewer things we have to pitch to our Bone Shards and Village Rites effects. Blood for the Blood God does a decent impression of Thrill of Possibility, but since we're not doing mass sacrifice like a Blood avatar deck would, it's unlikely that we'll get a good enough discount to make this worthwhile. So we'll make these swaps. These cards actually are exactly what we're looking for, since we can pseudo-flipper our creatures with Extus and are casting a lot of instants and sorceries. But they're much too expensive to cast to get the kind of value that we actually need. So we'll be making these changes instead. So what do our lands look like? Since Extus doesn't actually require red mana and vanishingly few of our early plays require it, we want our dual lands to err on the side of black and white. And since our curve is so low, it's really important to not be drawing lands after we get our engine online. So I really like new Capenna fetches to thin out the deck and make it easier to find our win conditions and harder to draw lands in the late game. So what's our timeline? We'll start off turns 2 and 3 with either an extensive selection of Enter the Battlefield discard dorks, or else some mana rocks that ramp into a turn 3 Extus. Once Extus is in play and we have a discard dork on the field, we'll begin drawing through our deck and using Extus to recycle our earlier discard effects, and deploying further interaction in the form of these removal pieces. This storm of removal and hand disruption is just brutal to fight against, and all the while, we are digging through the deck with a library of card draw, finally pivoting into these tutor effects to help end our opponent's suffering in a more considerate time frame, by searching up a Last Void World Gorger Dragon combo for infinite mana, and sending Extus back to the command zone for infinite blood avatar damage. This deck is oppressive. Its ability to reuse Enter the Battlefield removal on its cheap creatures makes it increasingly interactive, while the stream of discard effects makes it harder to fight against. I honestly thought exile effects and other Silver Bullet style solutions would be a bigger worry with this deck, but after extensive playtesting, the chance your opponents have enough resources to fight back is negligible at best, inevitably prompting kill on sight kinds of responses, so be prepared for that kind of reaction. A very special thanks to all my amazing patrons. When I started this channel, I wanted to talk about deck building decisions with my videos, but in practice what ends up happening is that I talk for 30 minutes about all the nuance of a deck, which is longer than I'm comfortable with posting to YouTube. Here, patrons can request priority deck techs, access extended discussions on their favorite decks, in-depth guides on complex game actions, and more. So if you enjoy this content, consider becoming a patron today. One of the things my patrons have made possible is a special series of deck techs that I'm really excited to show off to you guys. When I finally get them all uploaded, I'll be giving away a special collection of altars and tokens that I've made, corresponding to each deck on the channel. For example, for the Merkle Lord of Bones deck, the prize is a set of double-faced altars of the most prominent cards in the deck, whose backsides are set in the constellation frame with updated text to show that they're acting as enchantments now. For every 1,000 views on each video, I'll increase the prize pool for that deck. All you have to do to be eligible to win is be subscribed to the channel. Consider supporting the channel today. If you like this video, here are some of the decks I'm working on next, so if you like what you see, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any, and check out the playlist in the top left for more. Thanks for watching!